Imagine a life where nothing, not rudeness, lies, or disrespect, can disturb your inner calm. Picture yourself navigating the world's chaos with a profound tranquility that makes others wonder what secret you possess. You still perceive insults and witness drama, but these no longer penetrate your core. They might touch you, but they don't move you. But let's be honest, how often has a single thoughtless comment ruined your entire day? How many nights have you lain awake, replaying an argument, feeling angry all over again, long after the event has passed? Most people don't live in peace, they live in constant reaction. They don't control their emotions control them. One insult, one rejection, one unexpected glance, and their entire energy shifts. This isn't because the world is so powerful, but because they've never learned to reclaim their power. Yet, here's the truth taught by Stoicism centuries ago and confirmed by neuroscience today: you can become emotionally untouchable. Not cold or numb, but truly untouchable, like a mountain enduring a storm. The wind howls, the rain crashes, but the mountain remains steadfast. That's the inner strength we're going to unlock today. Once you possess it, you'll never be unsettled by what someone says. You'll never feel diminished by another's mood. You'll never again be angered or bothered by anyone or anything. We're not just talking about maintaining composure, we're talking about complete emotional sovereignty, true stoic power. This is the kind of strength Marcus Aurelius wrote about, not merely to appear wise, but to bear the weight of an empire without losing his soul. So stay with me. What we're about to explore will fundamentally change how you perceive others, how you manage triggers, and most importantly, how you master yourself. And if you value what we're doing here, the clarity, the calm, the tools to live an unshaken life, there's one small favor I'll ask: hit the subscribe button. It's free, helps more than you realize, and provides the support that keeps this content coming. It's not them, it was never them. This is the primary shift in perspective required if you wish to cease being angry, triggered, or emotionally hijacked by others. You might believe it's their tone, their disrespect, how they dismissed your efforts, or their eye rolling, but that's merely the surface. What truly stings is what these moments stir within you. Something deeper, older, something you're not even fully conscious of. Carl Jung once stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is precisely what we do every time we blame others for our feelings. We surrender control of our emotional state and then wonder why we're constantly being driven into chaos. However, the truth is, no one can make you feel anything without your participation. Anger, frustration, resentment, they aren't caused by other people. They're caused by your response to them, and that response is shaped by the unresolved parts of yourself that you've been avoiding for years. Consider this: two individuals can encounter the exact same insult. One shrugs it off, the other simmers in it for days. The insult didn't change. The difference lies in what it resonated with internally. We're not reacting to what they said or did, we're reacting to what it touches within us. Old wounds, expectations, unquestioned beliefs. And more often than not, it's not even about the immediate moment. It's about everything that moment reminds us of. When someone ignores you and you feel invisible, that pain isn't born in that second. It's a repetition, a mirror. Perhaps it's reflecting all the times you felt overlooked while growing up. When someone criticizes you and you erupt, that reaction didn't originate from the words themselves. It came from a need to protect an identity you've worked hard to maintain. Perhaps being perceived as competent, good, or strong is so central to your self-view that even the slightest crack feels like a collapse. That's the real battlefield. Not the conversation, not the coworker, partner, or online stranger. It's what's unfolding within you. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And self-knowledge isn't merely knowing what you like or what your goals are. It's understanding the parts of you that still ache, that still crave approval, that still believe peace must come from being treated in a specific way. This is where the breakthrough begins. You are not your reaction. You are not your anger. You are not your pain. You are the one observing those things. You are the awareness beneath it all. The more you connect to that awareness, the less you need the external world to behave perfectly for you to feel okay. This doesn't imply you must tolerate disrespect. It means your peace is no longer contingent on its presence or absence. That's an entirely different level of freedom. Because most people aren't truly living, they're simply reacting. One text message ruins their morning. One online comment derails their entire mindset. One negative glance from someone else sends them spiraling into self-doubt. That's not living, that's surviving on emotional autopilot. But you can disembark from that ride, and it starts when you cease making them the villain in your story. The moment you stop saying, "They made me feel this way," and start saying, "Something in me responded to that," everything changes. You reclaim your power. You begin to ask better questions. Not, "Why are they like this?" but "Why does this bother me so much?" Not, "Why are they so disrespectful?" What am I holding on to that makes me so reactive to this? That question, "What am I holding on to?" is where you'll discover most of your answers. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And conquering the self isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about understanding their origin and deciding if they still serve you. It's about noticing when your pride wants to retaliate, when your ego wants to be right, and choosing not to be governed by that. This isn't passivity, it's power. It's the power to choose your response, to feel the surge of emotion, and not let it dictate your next move. This kind of control isn't innate, it's something you cultivate, like a muscle, like discipline, like presence. The people who trigger you most are your greatest teachers. Not because they're wise, kind, or helpful, but because they show you precisely where you're still attached, where you're still vulnerable, where you've constructed an identity that relies on others treating you in a certain way to feel valid. And when you utilize these moments as mirrors, not battlegrounds, you grow. That's the distinction between reacting and evolving. Socrates once remarked, "Let him who would move the world first move himself." And that movement doesn't begin with altering your environment. It starts with observing yourself more clearly. It involves becoming aware of the narratives you construct when things don't go your way, the assumptions you make, the roles you play, the truths you cling to unquestioningly. When you believe someone should treat you better, and they don't, that gap between expectation and reality becomes suffering. But when you accept that people will act based on who they are, not who you are, you stop tethering your emotions to their behavior. You become unshakable because your peace is no longer reactive, it's rooted. You don't get offended as easily. You don't pursue apologies. You don't need everyone to understand you, agree with you, or like you. You know who you are, and that knowing becomes your anchor, even when the storm rages, even when someone disrespects you, even when life feels unfair. This is because you've stopped trying to control things that were never yours to control. You've stopped outsourcing your peace to people who are just as lost and reactive as you once were. You've stopped relying on the world to reflect your worth back to you. That's what Stoicism has always championed. Epictetus taught that we should concern ourselves solely with what's within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs. Everything else, what people say, what they do, how they treat us, is external. If you anchor your calm to the external, you'll never be steady. But if you learn to root it internally, nothing can move you. That's the invitation to move through life with grace, not because life is gentle, but because you are grounded, to face criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding and remain clear, not numb, not shut down, but strong, centered, awake. The next time someone attempts to provoke you, allow it to pass through. Don't deny the reaction, just don't identify with it. Watch it emerge, observe it subside. Let it simply be a ripple, not a wave. And if it still affects you, if the sting lingers, if the thoughts resurface later, good. That's not failure, that's the gateway. That's where you step through and declare, here's where I still need to do the work. Because the objective isn't to become emotionless, the objective is to become emotionally free, not controlled by impulses, not ruled by pride, but aware, intentional, unbothered. Not because you avoid life, but because you confront it so profoundly that it no longer frightens you. When you live from that place, people notice. They may not articulate it, but they sense it, the steadiness, the calm, the energy that conveys, "You can bring me chaos, but you won't drag me into it." That's not arrogance, that's mastery. And if you've made it this far, there's a reason. Some part of you recognizes it's time to stop surrendering your peace to people who don't even comprehend what they're doing. Some part of you understands that your calm is too precious to continually exchange for approval, validation, or control. You weren't born knowing how to react to rejection. You didn't arrive in this world with a detailed manual stating, when someone disrespects you, flare up. When they ignore you, crumble. When they criticize you, defend your pride at all costs. Those reactions, the quick anger, the defensiveness, the need to prove something, those were learned, passed down, absorbed like secondhand smoke. You didn't write the script, you simply started playing the part. That's what makes this so powerful, realizing that most of what you consider to be you, your temperament, your triggers, how you react under pressure, isn't actually you. It's conditioning. It's habit. It's a script that began writing itself long before you were even aware it was happening. Somewhere along the way, perhaps someone taught you, directly or indirectly, that being ignored means you don't matter, that being challenged means you have to fight, that being wrong means you're not enough. These beliefs are like hidden code, running quietly in the background of your life. And until you bring them into the light, they'll continue to direct your reactions without your permission. Carl Jung put it perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This means every emotional outburst, every sudden shutdown, every instance you overthink something someone said, that's not fate. That's not your personality. That's programming, and programming can be rewritten. But you can't change a script you're not aware you're acting out. So the work begins by becoming the observer, not the actor. You notice, you pause, you step back just enough to ask, what part of me is speaking right now? That question, when posed sincerely, opens the door to everything. Because the moment you feel triggered, the moment something or someone ignites a fire within you, it's easy to believe that fire is righteous, that it's justified. But strong emotion doesn't always equate to truth. Often, it simply means the script was activated. And when you consistently play out the same emotional loops over and over, with different people and in different situations, you begin to notice something peculiar. The actors keep changing, but the storyline, it's always the same. That's the giveaway. It's never truly about them. It's about what they awaken within you. And most people never take the time to trace the fire back to its spark. They don't question the reaction. They just assume it's valid because it feels real. But intensity doesn't equal accuracy. Just because you feel it deeply doesn't mean it's rooted in clarity. And when you start to unpack those reactions, what you'll often discover underneath isn't strength, it's fear. Fear of being perceived in a certain way, fear of not being heard, fear of not being enough. The script says, if I'm criticized, I must defend. But what if you didn't? What if you simply listened, filtered, and chose your response, not from fear but from presence? That's authorship. That's what it means to reclaim the pen. It doesn't mean you'll never experience anger, sadness, or discomfort again. It means you're no longer reacting from an unconscious place, you're responding with awareness. That space between trigger and reaction, that's where your freedom resides. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived unspeakable trauma, articulated it this way: between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Consider how different life feels when you stop reacting from the old script. Someone interrupts you, and instead of rushing to reclaim your voice, you observe, you breathe. You respond calmly, or perhaps not at all. Not because you're weak, but because you've realized not every moment warrants your energy. You've stopped auditioning for people who lack the power to validate you. That shift isn't subtle, it's transformative. It's the moment you transition from being emotionally controlled to being emotionally in control. Not controlled as in robotic, but controlled as in present, conscious, grounded. When you no longer need to prove or win or be right just to feel secure, you've achieved something far deeper than any argument could offer. And you begin to notice that the scripts that once controlled you lose their grip. The need for approval fades. The fear of being misunderstood softens. The urge to match someone else's aggression with your own dissolves. You realize you don't have to mirror the chaos around you. You can be the calm that reminds people there's another way to live. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." He wasn't advocating for domination, he was speaking of discipline, self-awareness. The quiet strength of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to assert it to the world. Because when you're still running an old script, it's not just your emotions that suffer, it's your relationships, your peace, your potential. How many doors have you closed because you reacted too quickly? How many connections have you damaged because the old story dictated? If they don't respect me immediately, cut them off. That story might have protected you once, but now it's likely keeping you small. Taking authorship of your reactions means you're no longer a puppet of past pain. You start recognizing the patterns. You feel the heat rising, and instead of acting on it, you sit with it. You ask yourself, what would my highest self do here? And then you do that, even if it's difficult, especially if it's difficult. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And if that feels too burdensome, let's reframe it. The examined life is where you find your peace. That's where you begin to experience something rare in this world, the sovereignty over your inner world. That's not something someone grants you, that's something you claim. And yes, it requires effort. Yes, it's uncomfortable at times. Observing yourself isn't always enjoyable, but neither is remaining trapped in patterns that keep you reactive, restless, and resentful. When you stop reacting from the script, you start writing something new. You stop being the echo of every harsh word you've ever heard. You stop playing out roles dictated by fear, ego, or childhood defense mechanisms. You start living from choice, and people around you will sense the difference. They'll notice you don't flinch as you used to, that you're not swayed by sarcasm or passive aggression, that you don't need to win every interaction. You'll stop seeking closure from people who can't even give it to themselves. You'll stop needing every misunderstanding to be rectified. Sometimes you'll simply let it go, not because you're defeated, but because you've chosen peace over performance. That's emotional authorship. That's power. And here's what's even more beautiful: when you start living this way, your presence becomes medicine, for yourself and for others. You grant people permission to slow down, to reflect, to lower their guard, because your stillness reminds them that perhaps, just perhaps, they don't have to keep playing the same roles either. So, the next time you feel a trigger, remember this: that initial surge of emotion, it's not you, it's the script, and you don't have to adhere to it. You can pause, breathe, reclaim the pen, and write something better. Every time you do, you become less of a puppet and more of a presence, less of a reaction and more of a response. And that, right there, is the path to peace, because the only real control you possess is how you choose to show up, not what they do, not what they say. Just you, your awareness, your choices, your script. And if you've journeyed this far and something within you is awakening, if this resonates in an unexpected way, it's not by chance. You were meant to hear it. You didn't lose control when they spoke those words. You lost it the moment you took them personally. That split second when your heart tightened, your jaw clenched, and your mind began to churn with comebacks and judgments, that was the true surrender. The moment you became offended, you relinquished your power. Most of us do this without even realizing it. Not because we're weak, but because we've been conditioned to believe that offense is a natural, automatic response. Someone insults you, you feel wounded. Someone disagrees with you, you feel threatened. Someone misunderstands you, and suddenly you feel invisible. But what if that pain, that sting, that emotional drop wasn't something that happened to you, but something you allowed? We live in a world where offense is currency. It's how people connect, how they garner attention, how they define themselves, by what infuriates them. But when everything offends you, you're no longer responding to reality. You're reacting to a fragile self-image, one that demands constant protection and reinforcement. And that's exhausting. Aristotle once said, "Anybody can become angry." That is easy, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power. He was highlighting something most people overlook. True emotional power isn't found in reaction. It's found in restraint, in discernment, in choosing what deserves your energy. Because here's the thing: offense isn't objective. What hurts you might not even register for someone else. It's not the event, it's your interpretation. It's the story your mind constructs the instant something uncomfortable occurs. They're disrespecting me. They don't value me. They're trying to hurt me. And once that narrative takes hold, your nervous system reacts as if it's the truth. But offense isn't an alarm, it's a mirror. It reflects which parts of your identity are still fragile, still unhealed. That's where your real work lies, not in silencing the world around you, but in strengthening the world within you. Because when your sense of worth depends on everyone treating you perfectly, you're constantly at risk. One sharp word, one misstep, and your peace vanishes. What makes someone truly unbothered isn't numbness, it's clarity. It's knowing that your value doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's opinion. It's knowing that you don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need every comment to be kind. You don't even need to be agreed with. What you need is to stop offering your power to people who haven't earned it. That power isn't something they take, it's something you give every time you let someone's words dictate your mood, every time you shrink or explode to defend an identity, every time you let offense define the moment instead of your principles. And the more often that occurs, the more you train your mind to seek out disrespect, betrayal, and injustice, even when it's absent. Plato warned us long ago, "What can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark?" The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And this is precisely that. We become afraid of truth, of growth, of self-responsibility, because it means we can no longer blame the world for how we feel. And that's initially uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Because if you're not responsible for your reactions, then you're merely a puppet. You're always at the mercy of the next person's behavior, the next careless comment, the next disagreement. But if you are responsible, then everything changes. You realize you have options. You can pause, reflect, refrain, choose. You can learn to ask yourself better questions in the heat of the moment. Not, why are they like this? But why does this hit me so hard? Not how dare they, but what part of me still needs this kind of validation? That level of self-honesty might sting initially, but it frees you because it redirects the focus back where it belongs on your inner world. You begin to perceive offense not as an injury, but as insight, as feedback, as a signal that something within you is still raw, still seeking approval, still trying to prove its worth. And when you can look at that without flinching, without fleeing, without blaming, that's when you start to grow. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Getting offended is often just fighting the old beliefs, old stories, old defenses. But when you stop feeding that loop, you can start building something stronger, a new default, one rooted in confidence, in composure, in quiet strength. You stop reacting from your wounds and start responding from your values. You become harder to provoke, not because you're colder, but because you're wiser. Because you understand the difference between something that's genuinely harmful and something that's merely uncomfortable, between disrespect and misunderstanding, between actual threats and imagined ones. The moment you realize you don't have to respond to every challenge is the moment you step into a deeper kind of freedom. And that freedom isn't about allowing people to walk all over you. It's about refusing to let them walk inside your mind without permission. Let's say someone insults you. You hear it, you feel it. But you don't react, you don't internalize it. You observe it like a passing car. It's there, you see it, but it doesn't impact you. That's not detachment, that's self-respect. You respect yourself enough not to let a few careless words rewrite your self-image. And when you operate from that place, your energy shifts. You stop needing to prove yourself in every interaction. You stop getting drawn into pointless arguments. You stop squandering your peace as if it's cheap, and people sense it. They may not voice it, but they perceive the difference, that groundedness, that emotional weight, that quiet command that declares, "I'm not here to be triggered, I'm here to be free." Freedom in this context isn't just about time or money or lifestyle, it's emotional sovereignty. It's knowing that you are in charge of how you feel, not the world, not the crowd, not the algorithm, not the stranger in the comments. Just you. And yes, it's challenging sometimes, especially when the insult feels personal, when it echoes something you already feared was true. That's when offense feels most justified, but it's also when the opportunity for growth is greatest, because it invites you to look within and ask, is this something I believe about myself? If it is, work on it. If it's not, let it go. Either way, you win. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That quote alone could transform your life if you take it seriously, because it shifts the entire focus from blame to clarity, from defensiveness to depth, from being a victim of every interaction to becoming the master of your inner experience. That doesn't mean you won't feel things. You will. You're human. But feeling something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that's where power lies, in the space between the feeling and the action, in the choice to breathe instead of lash out, to listen instead of argue, to let the moment pass without turning it into a storm. So the next time you feel the sting of offense rising, remember this is a fork in the road. You can give your power away, or you can keep it. You can replay the insult in your head all night, or you can see it for what it is, a fleeting thought from someone who may not even understand themselves. Because in the end, what offends you reveals more about you than it does about them. It points to the edges of your ego, the cracks in your confidence, the places you're still not fully at peace with who you are. And when you heal those places, the world stops being so loud, so hostile, so threatening. You start to move differently, speak differently, think differently. You don't walk into every room trying to protect yourself. You walk in already whole. It's about knowing you don't need to be offended to stand strong. And when you finally stop relinquishing it, that power becomes yours again. Fully, quietly, permanently. When someone lashes out, mocks you, or treats you coldly for no apparent reason, your first inclination might be to take it personally, to believe it's an attack, to feel as though you did something wrong, or that you're somehow insufficient. That's how we've been conditioned to think. If they're upset, it must be about us. If they're distant, we must have failed. But the truth, the deeper truth, is this: they're not attacking you, they're bleeding on you. That anger, that sarcasm, that sharp look, it's not a weapon aimed at your identity, it's a symptom of something unhealed within them. Pain has a way of escaping. Sometimes it erupts, sometimes it festers silently, but it always manifests somewhere, and often it lands on the closest individuals. You simply happen to be in their vicinity when it's spilled over. Carl Jung once stated, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. What he meant is this: the more you comprehend your own wounds, your own emotional history, the easier it becomes to see that others aren't trying to harm you, they're trying to survive themselves. And sometimes, survival appears as silence, sometimes it appears as control, sometimes it appears as cruelty, but in almost every instance, it's just pain in disguise. Consider your own behavior when you're hurting. Do you always communicate clearly? Are you always patient, open, and kind when you're overwhelmed, scared, or privately grieving something? Probably not. That's not because you're a bad person, it's because pain constricts the mind. It turns the heart inward. It stifles empathy, and that's what happens to others too. But here's where most people become stuck. They believe recognizing someone else's pain means excusing their behavior. It doesn't. You can still establish boundaries. You can still assert, this is not okay. But you do so with clarity, not with confusion. You say it without intertwining their pain with your worth. Because when someone treats you with disrespect, the danger isn't solely what they say or do, it's what your mind interprets. The interpretation, the story that forms: they ignored me, so I must not be valuable. They yelled at me, so maybe I deserved it. These quiet conclusions are where the real damage lies. But when you remember that their behavior is about them, not you, something changes. You stop absorbing the energy. You stop replaying the moment repeatedly. You don't carry it into your sleep, your relationships, your self-image. You perceive the pain for what it is: misplaced, misdirected, misunderstood, but not yours to bear. Socrates taught that people aren't angry at you, they're angry at themselves for not being able to manage you. That's a humbling thought. What appears to be an attack is often a reaction to their own lack of control, their own inner chaos. Your calm, your confidence, your silence, it reminds them of what they haven't resolved. and sometimes that's enough to trigger them. It's not your duty to fix them, but it is your responsibility not to internalize it. Because if you allow their bleeding to define you, you become a reflection of their wounds, not your truth. You start to react instead of respond. You match their tone, you mirror their dysfunction, and slowly, imperceptibly, you become part of the pain cycle too. But there's another path, one where you don't have to retaliate, one where you don't have to shrink, one where you simply stand in your strength and declare, I see what this is, and it's not mine. That's not indifference, it's mastery. It's the kind of inner stillness that can only arise when you realize your self-worth doesn't fluctuate with someone else's mood. Plato once wrote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." He wasn't suggesting everyone merits your energy, but he did remind us that most people are carrying something invisible, an old betrayal, a deep fear, a relentless voice in their head that never allows them to rest. And when that pressure builds, it erupts, often onto the wrong person. That doesn't mean you should accept mistreatment. It means you no longer mistake it for truth. This is how you maintain your composure. You recognize the pain, you honor your own boundary, but you don't internalize the insult into your identity. You don't let someone else's behavior rewrite your story. You simply let it pass. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough not to require their validation. And what happens over time is remarkable. You begin to discern patterns that were previously invisible. You notice how often people lash out after being hurt, how quickly coldness follows insecurity, how silence often masks a fear of rejection. Suddenly, the behavior that once confused or wounded you becomes easier to interpret. You stop guessing what's wrong with you and start understanding what's unresolved in them. That shift is subtle, but it's everything. It's the differential.